The year 2025 has plunged the European Union into an unprecedented energy crisis, a culmination of geopolitical upheavals and economic challenges that threaten its energy security. Several factors have converged to create this perfect storm. Qatar, one of the EU's critical suppliers of liquefied natural gas, has threatened to halt gas exports in response to the bloc's new corporate sustainability regulations. Meanwhile, the long-standing Russian natural gas transit through Ukraine has ceased as of today, following the expiration of a key agreement. To add fuel to the fire, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has issued an ultimatum, demanding Europe increase its purchases of American LNG or face tariffs. These developments expose the EU's vulnerability in the global energy market, revealing cracks in its strategy to achieve energy diversification and security. With gas reserves dwindling and energy costs soaring, the bloc finds itself in a precarious position. The EU is now tasked with maintaining economic stability, meeting ambitious sustainability goals, and navigating a volatile geopolitical landscape, all while contending with intensifying pressures from its major energy suppliers. This video delves into the unfolding energy crisis, examining its complexities and far-reaching implications for the global economy. We'll analyze the drivers behind these developments, the immediate impacts on European consumers and industries, and the long-term consequences for international markets and trade. The EU's energy crisis is not just a regional issue, it is a reflection of the shifting dynamics in global power and economic interdependence. From strained relationships with energy suppliers like Qatar and Russia to the mounting influence of the United States, the challenges facing the EU highlight the delicate balance of geopolitics and economics in today's interconnected world. Let's dive deeper into the forces shaping this critical moment. At the heart of Europe's energy crisis lies an escalating standoff with Qatar, one of the world's largest suppliers of liquefied natural gas. As Europe scrambles to secure energy stability, Qatar's stern warning has sent shockwaves through the bloc. This tension stems from the EU's Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which demands that large companies ensure their supply chains are free from human rights violations and environmental harm. The stakes? Non-compliance could cost companies up to 5% of their global revenue in penalties. Qatar, heavily reliant on LNG exports, views this directive as a direct economic threat. Energy Minister Saad Sharida Al-Kaabi minced no words, warning that should such penalties impact Qatar Energy, a key state revenue generator, the country would have no choice but to halt LNG exports to the EU. This statement couldn't come at a worse time for Europe. With gas storage reserves depleting at record speeds due to harsh winters and limited alternative supplies, Qatar's LNG is more crucial than ever. The EU has positioned the directive as a pillar of its long-term sustainability goals, aiming for net zero emissions by 2050. However, the directive has drawn criticism from businesses and trade partners alike for its sweeping scope and potential to create trade disruptions. For Qatar, the directive isn't just about compliance, it's about survival in a fiercely competitive energy market. Europe faces a difficult balancing act: uphold its sustainability principles or compromise to secure energy supplies. Without constructive dialogue, the risk of Qatar following through on its threat could leave Europe in an even more precarious situation, pushing energy costs higher and deepening the crisis. The bloc's ability to diplomatically navigate these challenges will be a critical test of its resilience in the face of geopolitical pressure. As of January 1, 2025, Europe faces yet another blow. The cessation of Russian natural gas flows through Ukraine. For decades, this transit route served as a lifeline, delivering a significant portion of Europe's energy needs. The expiration of the transit agreement without renewal marks a historic disruption, intensifying Europe's scramble to secure alternative supplies. The timing couldn't be worse. European gas reserves are being depleted at their fastest rate in years, with a particularly harsh winter compounding the strain. Benchmark gas prices have already surged to their highest levels in over a year, a stark reflection of market anxiety. Despite the EU's earlier moves to reduce dependence on Russian energy, particularly following the Ukraine conflict, this sudden halt highlights the enduring grip of Russian gas on European markets. Russia, meanwhile, has strategically reoriented its energy exports to new markets, particularly in Asia. Countries like China and India have emerged as key buyers, collectively accounting for over 78% of Russia's crude oil exports by 2023. This pivot has enabled Russia to mitigate much of the financial impact of Western sanctions, while simultaneously strengthening ties with BRICS nations and other non-Western alliances. For Europe, however, The loss of Russian gas has created a supply vacuum that alternative routes such as the Turk Stream pipeline cannot fully fill. Adding complexity, intra-European tensions have flared. Countries like Slovakia and Hungary, heavily reliant on Russian gas, have voiced fierce opposition to the transit halt, warning of severe economic repercussions. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico has projected that European consumers could face an additional 40 to 50 billion euros in annual gas costs, alongside steep rises in electricity prices. These pressures highlight the uneven impact of the crisis across EU member states, threatening unity at a time when collective action is most needed. Europe's ability to adapt will be a defining test of its energy strategy. Without swift and coordinated responses, the bloc risks deeper economic instability and a broader geopolitical fallout. Qatar, a linchpin in Europe's LNG supply chain, has issued a stark warning to the European Union. The country's energy minister announced that Qatar could halt LNG exports in retaliation against the EU's new Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. This legislation requires large companies to scrutinize their supply chains for human rights abuses and environmental harm, with penalties reaching up to 5% of global revenue for non-compliance. Qatar's leadership has branded these measures as financially untenable, signaling that its gas exports would not continue under such punitive conditions. The timing of this ultimatum is critical. Qatar has grown increasingly essential to the EU's energy portfolio as Europe has moved to reduce reliance on Russian natural gas. The nation's LNG exports have been a stabilizing force, and its plans to expand export capacity by 2027 made it a cornerstone of Europe's long-term energy diversification strategy. A severing of this relationship would exacerbate the energy crisis, with Europe's depleted reserves and sky-high energy prices already placing the bloc in a precarious position. For Qatar, this conflict isn't purely economic, it's geopolitical. The country's decision to challenge the EU underscores the shifting power dynamics in the global energy market, where resource-rich states are leveraging their supplies for political influence. Qatar's actions could embolden other suppliers to adopt a similarly assertive stance, further complicating Europe's efforts to secure stable energy partnerships. The EU faces a dilemma: how to reconcile its sustainability goals with the practicalities of energy security. While the Corporate Sustainability Directive aligns with the bloc's 2050 net zero emissions target, it has been criticized for imposing burdensome costs on stakeholders. European Commission officials have hinted at a willingness to negotiate adjustments to the directive, but time is of the essence. A prolonged standoff with Qatar risks not only disrupting energy supplies but also undermining the EU's credibility in navigating complex geopolitical landscapes. Europe's ability to manage this confrontation with Qatar will have far-reaching implications, not just for energy security, but for the global perception of its regulatory power and diplomatic agility. The expiration of the Russian natural gas transit agreement through Ukraine on January 1, 2025, has marked another blow to Europe's energy security. For over 5 decades, this pipeline served as a critical artery, delivering natural gas to Europe and powering industries, homes, and infrastructure. The collapse of this deal is not an isolated incident but the culmination of years of escalating tensions between Europe and Russia, exacerbated by the ongoing war in Ukraine. Efforts to renegotiate the 5-year deal, originally brokered in 2019, failed despite months of negotiations. Russia has leveraged its energy dominance to maintain geopolitical influence, redirecting its exports to alternative markets, particularly within the BRICS nations. China and India now account for nearly 80% of Russia's crude oil exports, a dramatic shift from the 32% share they held just a few years ago. This realignment underscores a broader trend: Russia's capacity to mitigate Western sanctions by deepening ties with non-European markets. The absence of Russian gas flowing through Ukraine has sent European natural gas benchmark prices soaring to levels not seen in over a year. While Ukraine's gas transit accounted for only 5% of Europe's overall supply by the end of 2024, its cessation has left a tangible void. Central European countries like Hungary and Slovakia, heavily reliant on this route, are scrambling to secure alternative energy sources, often at higher costs. The strain on reserves, coupled with surging demand during a harsh winter, has amplified the crisis. Russia's strategy isn't just about redirection, it's about reinforcing alliances and creating dependencies outside the Western sphere. For instance, Russian oil exports to Saudi Arabia surged in 2024, enabling the kingdom to address domestic energy needs during a record-breaking summer. Saudi Arabia's decision to increase imports of Russian fuel oil highlights how energy alliances are reshaping global trade flows, often to Europe's disadvantage. For the European Union, the cessation of the Ukraine transit deal not only signals the urgent need for alternative energy infrastructure, but also underscores the fragility of its current energy diversification strategy. While EU leaders such as Ursula von der Leyen insist that phasing out Russian fossil fuels by 2027 is attainable, the reality is more complex. Transitioning to alternative sources like liquefied natural gas, LNG, involves significant logistical and financial hurdles, with some member states already vocal in their opposition to abrupt changes. This development serves as a stark reminder of the risks tied to geopolitical reliance on adversarial suppliers. It forces Europe to confront hard questions about its energy future, its unity as a bloc, and its ability to navigate a landscape where economic interests often conflict with political ideals. As Europe struggles to navigate its energy crisis, the incoming U.S. administration under President-elect Donald Trump has added yet another layer of complexity. Trump's ultimatum, either increase American LNG purchases or face tariffs, has put the European Union in a precarious position. This demand is not just an economic negotiation tactic, it reflects a broader strategy to assert U.S. dominance in global energy markets while addressing trade imbalances. The United States has rapidly become one of the EU's leading suppliers of liquefied natural gas, especially after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. By the first half of 2024, nearly half of the EU's LNG imports originated from the US, reflecting Europe's efforts to diversify away from Russian energy sources. However, the cost of American LNG is significantly higher than Russian gas, adding strain to European industries and consumers already grappling with skyrocketing energy prices. Trump's approach to trade is famously transactional, and his ultimatum has sparked concerns about a potential trade war between the US and the EU. Tariffs on European exports could exacerbate inflationary pressures on both sides of the Atlantic, while also undermining the fragile economic recovery in post-pandemic Europe. The EU, which has already made substantial investments in American LNG infrastructure, finds itself under pressure to further deepen its reliance on US energy, a move that contradicts its broader goals of energy autonomy and diversification. EU leaders have responded with caution. European Commission spokesperson Olaf Gill emphasized the importance of transatlantic cooperation, but also hinted at the bloc's reluctance to concede entirely to Trump's demands. "We are ready to discuss strengthening our already robust relationship," he said, "but Europe's energy future must balance external partnerships with internal resilience." While the US LNG boom presents an opportunity for Europe to secure a reliable energy source, it also exposes the bloc to geopolitical risks. Trump's ultimatum demonstrates the leverage energy exporters hold over import-dependent nations, underscoring Europe's vulnerability in the global energy chessboard. The ultimatum also raises broader questions about Europe's position in an increasingly multipolar world. Can the EU afford to become heavily reliant on a single supplier, even if it's a strategic ally? Or does this crisis present an opportunity for Europe to accelerate its investments in renewable energy and local energy production, breaking free from the cycles of dependency that have defined its energy policies for decades? These questions are at the heart of Europe's energy conundrum. The choices made in response to Trump's demands will not only shape the EU's energy landscape but also define its economic and geopolitical trajectory for years to come. The expiration of the Russia-Ukraine gas transit agreement on January 1, 2025, has sent shockwaves through Europe. This agreement, which historically facilitated the flow of Russian natural gas to Europe, had been a cornerstone of the continent's energy strategy for decades. Its lapse not only disrupts supply chains, but also highlights the enduring vulnerabilities in Europe's energy framework. For years, Russian gas flowing through Ukraine accounted for a significant portion of Europe's energy supply. Even after the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, gas continued to transit through the war-torn country under a precarious agreement. Now, with that arrangement terminated, European nations face the dual challenge of sourcing alternative supplies and managing the economic fallout of higher energy costs. Benchmark gas prices surged immediately after the deal's expiration, reflecting market anxieties over supply shortages. Central European countries like Slovakia and Hungary, which remain heavily dependent on Russian gas, are among the hardest hit. Slovakia has been particularly vocal in its opposition to the cessation of transit, with Prime Minister Robert Fico warning that the economic impact on Europe would far outweigh the losses incurred by Russia. Fico has also criticized Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's stance on blocking Russian gas flows, accusing Kyiv of prioritizing its own geopolitical goals at the expense of European stability. The end of the agreement has reignited debates over Europe's energy dependency and the efficacy of its diversification strategy. Despite significant efforts to reduce reliance on Russian energy since 2022, the bloc remains entangled in a web of pipelines, contracts, and geopolitical calculations. Liquefied natural gas, LNG imports from the United States and other suppliers have helped mitigate some of the shortfalls, but they come with higher costs and logistical challenges. Russia, on the other hand, has adapted to European sanctions and transit disruptions by redirecting its energy exports to other markets, particularly in Asia. China and India have emerged as major consumers of Russian oil and gas, underscoring the shift in global energy dynamics. Meanwhile, Russia's gas exports to countries like Hungary and Serbia via the Turkstream pipeline continue, albeit on a smaller scale, highlighting the fragmented nature of energy flows in the region. The cessation of the transit agreement also raises broader geopolitical implications. For Ukraine, the loss of transit revenues, estimated at over $2 billion annually, comes at a critical time as the country continues to resist Russian aggression. The absence of a renewed deal further isolates Ukraine economically, while Europe grapples with the repercussions of its energy dependency on a war-torn corridor. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has downplayed the immediate impact of the transit deal's expiration, asserting that Europe's diversified energy sources and robust reserves will cushion the blow. However, critics argue that this optimism overlooks the long-term challenges of transitioning to alternative energy pathways while managing escalating costs. This development underscores a recurring theme in Europe's energy saga: the intersection of economics, geopolitics, and regional security. The end of the Russia-Ukraine gas transit agreement is more than a logistical setback. It is a stark reminder of the complexities of Europe's energy dependencies and the urgent need for a cohesive, forward-looking strategy. Adding to the European Union's energy woes is the escalating pressure from the United States, led by President-elect Donald Trump. Known for his protectionist policies and aggressive trade strategies, Trump has issued a stark ultimatum to the EU to significantly increase imports of American liquefied natural gas, LNG, or face steep tariffs. This warning comes at a time when Europe is scrambling to secure alternative energy sources following the cessation of Russian gas supplies and tensions with Qatar. Trump's demand is not just an economic maneuver, it is part of a broader strategy to bolster the U.S. energy sector and address the trade deficit with Europe. The EU must make up their tremendous deficit with the United States by purchasing our oil and gas. Otherwise, it's tariffs all the way, Trump declared on his social media platform. This rhetoric underscores his administration's intent to capitalize on Europe's energy vulnerabilities to strengthen America's economic position. Currently, the United States has become a significant LNG supplier to Europe, accounting for nearly half of the bloc's LNG imports in 2024. This surge in exports followed Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which disrupted Europe's traditional energy flows. However, Trump's ultimatum introduces the risk of a trade war, potentially destabilizing the already fragile energy dynamics between the two regions. For the EU, complying with Trump's demands would mean further dependence on U.S. energy supplies, potentially at the expense of long-term diversification goals. While American LNG has provided a lifeline during Europe's energy crisis, it is far from a perfect solution. LNG imports come with higher costs compared to pipeline gas, adding to the financial burden on European consumers and industries already reeling from inflation and rising utility bills. On the other side of the Atlantic, Trump's ultimatum has sparked debate among policymakers and energy analysts. While the U.S. energy sector stands to benefit from increased exports, the imposition of tariffs on European goods could backfire, damaging trade relations and hurting industries on both sides. European Commission spokesperson Olaf Gill responded cautiously to Trump's statement, emphasizing the interconnected nature of US-EU economies and expressing willingness to negotiate. "We are ready to discuss how we can further strengthen our already strong relationship, including in the energy sector," Gill stated. The ultimatum also complicates Europe's efforts to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels and transition to renewable energy sources. Critics argue that increased imports of US LNG may undermine the EU's climate goals, as it locks the region into long-term contracts for natural gas, a fossil fuel. This tension between immediate energy needs and sustainability objectives highlights the difficult balancing act facing European leaders. For Trump, the ultimatum is a high-stakes gamble aimed at reshaping the transatlantic energy dynamic in America's favor. For Europe, it represents yet another challenge in a growing list of energy-related dilemmas. The bloc must now navigate this complex relationship carefully, balancing the need for American LNG with the risks of deepening its dependence on a single supplier. As the EU grapples with this new reality, the specter of tariffs looms large. Whether Trump follows through on his threats or negotiates a more favorable deal remains uncertain. But the implications of his policies are already being felt across global energy markets. For Europe, the challenge is clear: how to secure its energy future without sacrificing its economic stability or strategic autonomy. The energy crisis gripping the European Union in 2025 has far-reaching implications, not only for the bloc itself, but for the global economy at large. As energy prices surge and geopolitical tensions intensify, European consumers and industries are bearing the brunt of the crisis, with ripple effects spreading across international markets. The cessation of Russian natural gas transit through Ukraine, coupled with Qatar's warnings and Trump's ultimatum, has created a perfect storm of supply shortages and skyrocketing costs. European natural gas benchmark prices have reached their highest levels in over a year, reflecting widespread market concerns over the availability of affordable energy. For countries heavily dependent on Russian gas, such as Slovakia and Hungary, the impact has been particularly acute. With limited alternatives, these nations are now forced to source more expensive liquefied natural gas, LNG, or seek energy supplies from less reliable partners. For consumers, the crisis has led to soaring utility bills, squeezing household budgets, and reducing disposable income. This financial strain comes at a time when inflation is already eroding purchasing power across the continent. Higher energy costs are also driving up operational expenses for industries reliant on natural gas, from manufacturing to agriculture, leading to increased prices for goods and services. The economic ripple effects threaten to dampen growth prospects, deepen public discontent, and exacerbate social inequalities. Industries with high energy demands, such as steel and chemicals, are particularly vulnerable. Many companies are now reconsidering their operations in Europe, with some exploring relocation to regions with more stable energy markets. This exodus could undermine the EU's industrial base, reducing its competitiveness on the global stage and impacting employment levels. The crisis has also exposed the EU's over-reliance on external energy sources and highlighted the fragility of its energy security strategy. Efforts to diversify supplies, such as increasing LNG imports from the United States, have mitigated some of the immediate shocks but have come at a high cost. The EU's long-term strategy to reduce dependency on fossil fuels and transition to renewable energy has been challenged by the urgent need to secure short-term energy supplies. Geopolitically, the energy crisis has strained the EU's relationships with major suppliers. Qatar's warnings about halting gas exports over regulatory disputes reflect the growing friction between sustainability goals and the practicalities of energy security. Similarly, Russia's pivot to non-European markets, including China and India, signals a realignment of global energy trade flows, with Europe left scrambling to adapt. The United States, under Trump's leadership, has leveraged the crisis to strengthen its influence over Europe's energy policy. While American LNG has played a crucial role in filling the gap left by Russian gas, the potential for a trade war looms large, threatening to disrupt transatlantic relations. Trump's tariffs, if implemented, could exacerbate economic pressures on both sides, further complicating Europe's path to energy stability. Despite these challenges, the crisis has also served as a wake-up call for the EU to accelerate its investment in renewable energy and energy efficiency measures. Initiatives such as the European Green Deal, which aims to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, have taken on renewed urgency. However, the path forward is fraught with difficulties, as member states grapple with competing priorities and limited resources. The energy crisis of 2025 has underscored the delicate balance between geopolitics, economics, and sustainability in the modern world. For the EU, it is a moment of reckoning, a chance to reimagine its energy future and assert its role in the global order. The stakes are high, and the decisions made in the coming months will shape the bloc's trajectory for decades to come. The energy crisis of 2025 has laid bare the vulnerabilities of the European Union's energy strategy and the complexities of a geopolitically interconnected world. Faced with surging costs, supply disruptions, and rising tensions with key suppliers, the EU stands at a crossroads. The decisions made today, whether to strengthen renewable energy initiatives, forge new alliances, or reconfigure its trade policies, will determine its resilience and influence in the global order. As the bloc navigates these turbulent waters, the crisis offers not just a challenge, but an opportunity to redefine its energy future and secure its place in an increasingly competitive world. Thank you for joining us for this crucial analysis. If you found this information valuable, please support our channel by liking and subscribing. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you clear, accurate insights about major economic developments. Stay tuned for our next video exploring more aspects of this transformative period in global geopolitical and economic transformations.